This week, Ferruh Mavituna joins us from Netsparker to talk about the perception of automated web scanners. Avri Ziv will deliver this week's technical segment and tell us how the Oracle of Delphi will steal your credentials. And in the news this week, old code from Linux and BSD is vulnerable. My worst fears about IoT security appear to be reality. Voice control, more SSL-protected websites, security for small business, and hacking doomsday. All that and more on this edition of Paul Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul Security Weekly.
Brought to you by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer certification training and research. Visit sans.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offers. Onapsis, the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, the Pwn Phone, and the Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'd like to welcome our host. He's brought these gifts for you, but they're up in his bum, Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to a jolly edition of Paul Security Weekly. I've got my holiday cup of cheer, and I'm here with Mr. Larry Pesce.
Yeah, also with holiday
Cheers
cup of cheer.
That was like one of the first segments we ever recorded on video. We drank some eggnog. You remember that?
Yes, made with Martha Stewart's recipe, and man, can that woman drink. Damn, that was deadly.
On the lines via Skype, Mr. Joff Fire is here with us. Joff, welcome to the show.
G'day, gentlemen. Fresh back from Australia, jet-lagged and all. It's good to be here again.
That's good. And you guys are both penetration testers, which is awesome.
Right. We make sure the pens work.
That's right. Make sure all
That's
the pens
exactly
work. Fantastic.
Yep.
It's wonderful to be here. Make sure that you visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe to all of our shows, Enterprise Security Weekly, Startup Security Weekly, and Hack Naked News. Recently, I've taken over doing Hack Naked News, which has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I've kind of like done this security morning paper meets the Daily Show kind of thing, which has been fun.
Nice.
It's been fun. I don't know that I'm that funny, but I try.
Do you laugh at your own jokes?
I think I'm funny. That's all that matters. So,
Yep.
And make sure you take our super cool survey, securityweekly.com/survey. Go tell us what you think of the show and give suggestions so that we can make our podcast more better for you.
Or worse?
Or worse, maybe. Depends on your perspective.
Right.
No stranger to the show, Mr. Ferruh Mavituna is here, the CEO of Netsparker. Ferruh, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks for having me again. It's good to be back.
Yes, it's always nice to have you on the show, Ferruh, and we're going to talk about automated scanning today.
I was going to say, what do we left to talk with him about?
We always have, Ferruh always has interesting things to talk about.
Of course he does. It's a joke.
Great.
God.
So, Ferruh, I mean, you've got a background in development, and you've run Netsparker for a while, and web application security obviously is still a huge problem today. And it seems like the problem just gets larger and larger every day, because every day there's probably either a new language, a new framework, and certainly a new way to Dockerize and containerize and
Kubernetes
orchestrate
and-
your web applications. So there's like millions of them now instead of thousands of them in just one environment. So I'm anxious to talk with you about how we do automated scanning. And first, I think we're going to start off with some of the kind of negative perceptions of automated scanning. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's something, keep coming up, I think, and it's something important to address. And as you said, I've looked at the history of, what I have done a while ago, and I've spotted my first published vulnerability, which turns out in 2002 in web applications. So, that puts out like 14, 15 years now. Mm-hmm. And when you look at that history, that I've been doing web application security since then, and one of the frequent things that I keep hearing, like automated tools are not good enough, and they are not for everything. But at the same time, we are missing, part of the discussion that the manual testing is never good enough by itself either. So you need I think we talked in a couple of shows before as well, that you need this nice holistic approach. You need both of them. And what I really like to tell, if you're a penetration tester testing a web application security, and if you are doing it just manually, and I can bet you money, and I am 100% confident that you are not covering every single thing. Because technically it's not possible, because it will take you, couple of weeks. And I'm pretty sure you don't have a couple of weeks on that application as a penetration tester. Mm-hmm. And even if you do, and spend that manually fuzzing that application, trying to finding everything, then obviously you are wasting your client's money. So that's, I think, the key aspect of automation, web application security scanning. That's why you need it.
Well, Ferruh, that's an interesting point. I kind of liken it to a lot of the integrations and partnerships that happen in security. You have a company that maybe has a lot of different technologies, and they say, well, yeah, we've got, this technology that covers, these vulnerabilities. But on the other side, you've got maybe a smaller company that has an entire research team dedicated to that problem. Yeah. And that's where I think a similar analogy is the difference between manual scanning and automated scanning is you obviously come on the show and tell us about your research team. The number of different attacks and ways to present those attacks is just staggering, and it's something that can't be replicated by another manual penetration tester.
Exactly. If you are especially talking about a penetration tester or a security engineer who is responsible for testing Wi-Fi, testing, doing reverse engineering, doing malware analysis, doing incident response, or whatever. So just go pick any random penetration tester, and I'm sure they know network security, they know web security, they know Wi-Fi security, and a bunch of other stuff on top of that, up to a level, because they have to. That's how you do pen test. It's very rare in a company you got a pen tester only does network security, only does OS hardening or source code review or web application security testing, and I think the penetration tester, those are the best you can pick anyway. But if you go at any company, any enterprise kind of company, and go to the security engineering team, then you might even run into a worse situation. Because, majority of the time you got developers/security engineers. So this guy is originally a developer and doing security, learned that, doing his job quite well, doing our job quite well. But the problem is that they have so many other responsibilities. As you said, they are not going to sit around and researching web application security all day, every day. It's just not going to work out. And in an automated scanner, that's what you got a bunch of people just doing that.
Right.
And obviously, while seeing all this, as I always said, automated scanning is not going to solve all of your problems. You still need humans. So you still need actual penetration testing, finding all the logical issues, all the business problems, and so many other things. But the key point is, unless you combine these both, your coverage is not going to work out. You need the automation, you need the manual testing. Unless you're doing it wrong.
Ferruh, you bring up another really good point. In working in vulnerability management for as long as I did, I totally relate to this, and that's the perception of false positives and how any automated scanner, web or vulnerability or really any kind of scanner, is prone to so many false positives that I think people have the perception that, well, it's not worth it. And what I think they're referencing is maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, and that might have been the case. It might have been a much higher false positive. But I think largely from the automated scanners that I've seen in all different aspects of technology, that problem has gotten to be less and less. I mean, it's not completely gone 100%, but it's pretty close in a lot of cases.
That's a very important point. I mean, that's another thing. When someone tells me, app scanners don't work, or any other blah blah scanner don't work, that's part of the discussion. Like, they say, okay, I used once and I had, I don't know, so many false positives. And to be fair, we still have that problem in various places, like source code, especially source code automated source code scanning space is quite having quite a bit of trouble with false positives. And even dynamic testing got the same problem, but the level definitely not similar to what we had done 10 years ago, what we had even 5 years ago. Having said that, we have an approach to this problem which we started taking about 6 years ago, so about around 2010 when we first launched. And the solution is, the solution is quite straightforward if you're a technical guy, right? So let's say you have a scanner. Doesn't matter, it's network, it's web application, doesn't matter. Let's focus on web application, something I know. So in web application security, you got a report, and the report says you have a SQL injection. Okay, you're a penetration tester, what do? The next thing you do, you obviously try to exploit it. See if it's real or not. You not just look at it. You not just look at the response. It might not be enough. What you do, you actually try to exploit it. And if you exploit it, and if it's successful, then obviously it's not a false positive. It's real. It's nothing. It's as easy as this. It's nothing more complicated than that. So we thought, okay, if that's the case, if what an actual human being, if what an actual penetration tester would do that, why not automate it? And that's what we did. So when, for example, Netsparker, web application security scanner, finds a vulnerability, such as SQL injection, local file inclusion, doesn't matter, any vulnerability with an exploitable impact, with a direct impact, it actually exploits it. And then it doesn't just tell you, okay, this is real. It also gives you the proof. So let's talk about SQL injection example. It will give you data from your database. If it's a local file inclusion, it will give you the source code from one of your files. It will be your etc password, it will be your boot INI, whatever, depending on your platform environment. It will be source code of your web application. So once you've done that, you solve majority of the problems with false positive issue. Now you got a report that you can trust, you can use. And the report clearly states what it is. And just like it's coming from one of your engineers, it's already proven. So already someone tested it, almost like someone, it's all automated. But at the end of the day, when you see the proof, as a developer, you got a report, and the report got your database name. And the tester wouldn't know that database name unless they hacked into it. So it's just like that. It will give you the proof, and as a developer or anyone else getting that report, it's not false positive, it's got your data, got your private data in that report.
So
go ahead, Larry.
So great that you talked about the SQL injection and some of those and getting the proof. And I've noted with some of the other scanners that I've had the opportunity to use, cross-site scripting is subject to lots of false positives for something like that, because comparing the request and the response, and the data comes back, and in fact it's a false positive because of the way the browser parses it, the way it's formatted on the way back, yet those strings are still there. How are you guys dealing with some of those problems?
The core of the concept is quite similar. We believe if we can exploit it, it cannot be a false positive. So the very same idea, how do you exploit a cross-site scripting? The first step is, can you execute JavaScript? And the way we deal with it, when we find the cross-site scripting, we actually launch a second stage. In the second stage, we launch an internal Chromium, so it's a Chrome browser engine, and then we load the response, and then observe what it was. And we also do stuff like, click this link, click mouse over whatever the trigger is for that cross-site scripting, and then observe the JavaScript. Does that function get triggered? So did we able to inject our JavaScript into the page, and can we confirm it from the Chrome engine itself, not static, not by any other means, just like a user would use Chrome?
Awesome.
Obviously, you still, it solves the core problem. You still got edge cases like before the cross-site scripting, it only works on Internet Explorer, or it works on Chrome but wouldn't work on Firefox. So you still got that problem, but if you think about Defender point of view, if it's your application or if you're a penetration tester, you still want to fix that. You're not going to leave that just there because it's only exploitable in Chrome. That's not a good enough reason to leave a vulnerability there.
Yeah, and when I tested various web application scanners, like you said, that you would notice a lot of false positives in cross-site scripting.
Yep.
You won't see that in Netsparker because
That's awesome. Because of the way they're doing it.
Well, actually launching a browser is the right way to, really the only way to solve
and verifying whether it's calling that part of the engine. It's brilliant.
Now, we've talked about SQL injection and cross-site scripting, and I think a lot of people have the perception, Ferruh, that automated scanners can only find these like low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities, and that's not necessarily the case.
That definitely is not. And I think part of the reason we already discussed, we have a team of people looking into web application security every day. That's their job. And I think for an automated scanner, you got a couple of things. One, you got best practice issues. And the best practice issues are kind of easy to check, but it's a checklist. If you go to any big pen testing company, possibly you will have some sort of checklist like, okay, if we are testing your web application, then you should check this, you should check this, you should check this. You will never, forget. You will never forget checking the strength of SSL, is what kind of ciphers are being used. Or you don't forget checking for, let's say, caching or some headers, information leakage through something. So, just a standard list, nothing that can, for example, because you disclosed your server version, you're not going to get hacked. It doesn't work like that. But when you report, you say, okay, this is something possibly you should address. You don't want to expose this information for no good reason. So I think this is one aspect of web application security scanners. And the good thing about it, I think more than the pen testers, especially if you are developing a web application, there are just so many small details in security today from best practice point of view. Have you implemented this header? Have you, configured your SSL right? Have you done your caching right? Have you done just so many things right? You're accepting, let's say, calls, cross-origin requests. Yeah. Have you done your configuration correct? Is your Flash cross-domain XML is something, whatever. Is your robots.txt is showing lots of private folders? That kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think this is the first checklist, best practice. And obviously, scanners are fantastic at this. You got the checklist. It's easy to find, but the good thing is, as a tester, as a developer, you can simply forget about them. And it will be a reminder. And sometimes it will tell you stuff that you don't know about. To give you an example, one thing we did with Netsparker, and this is like way back, if an authentication page is not over SSL, obviously it reports it. It says, okay, you are sending username and password over HTTP, and that's bad, right? Okay, that's just, possibly any other scanner would do. But also, I wanted to separate these into two issues. If your authentication page is over HTTPS, however, if your authentication form's action is if your form is HTTP, but the action is HTTPS, which was quite common back in the day, not anymore, right?
Right.
We would report a different issue and explain very clearly, look, you think you are doing it right, but you definitely failed. And, here is the explanation, technical explanation. So as you can imagine, this is coming from experience, working as a pen tester so many years. The developers I talk with, it's immediately when you report something like this, they would even say like, this is a false positive. Clearly, we are sending it to SSL. And then you have to explain, look, it doesn't work like that. Your first page can be, still vulnerable to man in the middle, and username password still can be stolen, and so many other issues. So when you develop a web application scanner, when you get a report that kind, now your developer knows that mistake and learn from it and they address it. So that's the first part. And the second part is finding issues like SQL injection, local file inclusion, and tons of other vulnerabilities from external XML entities and other various awkward issues like you got cross-site scripting because of your Apache version kind of things. And the thing in here as well, web application scanners find the obvious stuff, but also they can find some crazy things as well. And to give you an example, one of the really cool things we did in Netsparker, when we find a local file inclusion, we also have another feature. We inject certain code into the log files by making requests. And then through local file inclusion checks, we check whether we can include those log files. And if that gets successful, we will report an issue that says, okay, we actually managed to get code execution through local file inclusion, right? I mean, your average security tester won't do that. They might know about it, but again, it comes to the point of automation. How many things they will have time to check?
Right.
Are they going to test this LFI blindly in every single page, in every single parameter? Possibly they won't. I mean, because it doesn't work, you don't have that kind of time. And that's why partially some of them will not even know about this technique. Some of them, even though they know, they won't have time to check it. Not blindly. They will do it if they think, okay, I got this right. This is happening, then I need to dig further. That will happen. But a better example would be async or blind issues, like blind SQL injection, completely blind. I'm not talking about response changes A to B. I'm talking about it's async SQL injection. Sorry, not async. It's sync, but there is no output. So nothing changes, no error messages. That means your only way of detecting that SQL injection is forcing database server to wait for, let's say, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then observe the response time. You got no other indication. And because it's blind, you wouldn't know where it is in all of the websites. So if you have 3 inputs and 30 pages, now you are talking about 90 attempts. And the fact that you can have about 9 combination of SQL injection correct syntax, let's say it's integer only, it starts with a single quote, it starts with a double quote, it's got 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups. One payload won't work in all of them because you have to close those groups to get a SQL injection right. And because you are doing it blindly, you don't even know whether there's a SQL injection in the first place. That means you have to blindly try 9 things to 300 inputs.
And you should do that probably more than once when you're doing a timing attack to make sure that it wasn't network latency or whatever, right?
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. And even more than that, we assume that you know which database you are dealing with.
Yeah.
So if it's MySQL, it's different. If it's Postgres, it's different. If it's SQL Server, it's different. So you see, if you're not doing this, you might have missed that SQL injection, and that's it. There is no way around it. It's just what it is.
You can tell we're getting excited.
Yeah. The SQL is a great use case. Now, Ferruh, what about single page applications, like the Web 2.0, HTML5 kind of thing?
That's another thing, right? I mean, I remember about 5 years ago, we went to a conference, Open App booth, and it was a developer conference in London. I forgot the exact title. So I keep getting this question. I'm telling, okay, this is what we do. We have a tool that automatically scans your website and finds vulnerabilities for you. And they're like, okay, that's neat, but I have authentication. It wouldn't work, right? No, it would. I have single sign-on. Would it work? Yes, it would. And the problem is that a technical computer user assumes because it's so complicated, it's not there. And I think that's part of the problem we are having as web app scanners. They assume the tool wouldn't work on modern environments, such as complex authentication, multiple step, single sign-on, whatever, or as you said, a single page application or heavy JavaScript environment. But it would actually, in single-page applications, in all of them. For example, with Netsparker, what we do, we launch Chrome, again, as the background engine. And then we actually figure out all the events on the page. And we got a bunch of other things, obviously. The combinations, what happens when we click this? Do we get new elements? Do we simulate new elements as well? So you click this button, it created 3 new buttons. Okay, we need to discover all these 3 buttons. And in a single page application, we can do all of that. The only flaw in Netsparker and pretty much all applications today, which will be addressed or can be addressed, but quite complex, is the flow issue. So a single page application can be crawled and attacked and scanned completely fine. Only problem you will have if you have a flow, a strict flow that requires you to click this and then click this and type this and do that. And then it boils down to the user, okay, as a user, you need to configure this. If you want to test this, you need to configure this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the real issues, because I don't like when users have to configure stuff. What I just want them to run it. And it would work, 90% of the time or 95% of the time or as much as it can. When people start to configure stuff, they say, okay, it's just taking too much time. But again, it boils down what you want to do. Do you want 100% coverage? Then, well, you want to configure it. Or you will say, okay, I'm gonna take care of this manually. But again, you got those problems. So maybe you will do some sort of smart fuzzing, or you will be really, spending quite a lot of time on that feature, on that functionality, test it completely.
Larry, Joff, questions for Ferruh. I know you guys both do web application testing as part of your jobs.
Yes. Ferruh, you talked a lot about web application stuff, and you and I both know that so many times mobile apps are nothing but a glorified web app that's either interpreted different through their own browser or something of the like. How effective is doing something like Netsparker against mobile websites and the mobile app type of interface?
If it's an actual website, that you can access through HTTP protocol and response with some sort of HTML, but mobile friendly, it will be fine.
Great.
And the other thing, it's actually one thing that interests me quite a bit about security and mobile. I keep getting a lot of questions when I talk with more business people, not technical people, but general business people. And they say, okay, you do security, but do you do mobile security? Because it's all about that. And what I'm saying, okay, look, I understand mobile is important. It's huge. It's massive. But the fact is, the binary on your phone only got your data. The real data is on your servers. That your mobile application talks through a web service. And that's where you need to test. Obviously, I'm not undermining the binary security of the mobile application, but from a risk management point of view, this is one application, this is one person data on that mobile application, compared to your millions of customers' data on the cloud, on whatever the data server you have, which your mobile application talk to web services, which again, something we cover. But I think that's also an important thing to keep in mind, like this is how it works, this is important, but here's the real data. If you are doing any kind of risk assessment, that will be your risk assessment.
Ferruh, does Netsparker have the ability to test a web-based API? And in which ones do you test, and what are the different scenarios?
You love it.
Yes, it does support, the web-based API possibly is some sort of web service. So it can be REST API, which we do support. Or it can be, something like SOAP or something like that in that range. And again, we do support. And what you need to do, depending on the API, you can give a Swagger file, generally REST applications use it to define all the REST API. Or you can give a WSDL file if it's a more SOAP kind of web service. But as long as it's REST kind of API, it does support it. And if you don't have a Swagger, you can still manually, explain your API. And maybe even better, if you have an application that utilizes that API, when Netsparker crawls the application, it says, okay, I've noticed the web service that you are talking to, and I'm going to scan that as well, and all the communication that you have done with it.
That's all. Well, yeah, because typically the application uses the API, and then there's some other different applications on mobile or whatever, or other people's apps that use the same API.
Yep.
And Nessus worked the same the same way. Ferruh, I have a question that we're going to talk about in the stories as it relates to vulnerability scanners on the network side, and it's kind of interesting. Some people are talking about the differences in vulnerability scanners and how there is zero overlap in what one scanner finds versus another. In other words, if you got scanner A and scanner B, right? Scanner A finds some stuff that scanner B doesn't, and scanner B finds some stuff that scanner A doesn't. So when you're shopping around for a web application vulnerability scanner, like, how do you know which one is right for you? And how do you know that if it's not scanning for stuff, if those are things you should care about or not?
That's a fantastic question and very hard one, I think. And recently, I got this discussion. It was a similar situation. One of the prospects, they tested Netsparker and one competitor, and they came back to us and say, okay, this competitor found 6 cross-site scriptings and Netsparker found 4. Okay, that's interesting. Let's look at the report. Lo and behold, that's correct. Indeed, we checked the report because Netsparker missed a directory that wasn't on the default directory list of, brute force directories. It missed 2 cross-site scripting, which is like chain reaction. If it were to find the directory, it would have found, those 2 issues as well. So, but the problem is, and this is where it gets challenging. When let's say you are buying a car, okay, and you don't buy a car, generally, just by driving it for 5 minutes. You generally get a review. You get someone to, talk to you about it. And if you are more geeky kind of guy, you learn about engine, all the long run, what's the mileage, how much it's going to cost you, what's the support, all that kind of stuff. What's the support in your country as well. But at the end of the day, unless you are a technical guy on, and a car mechanic or something, that you won't be able to just look at the engine and say this car is good. It's not just going to work out like that. And your 5 minutes drive on that one parkour, it's not going to give you the sense of what car is it. So I think buying a web application security scanner is quite similar. One thing you said, first of all, you need to be sure that it works on your environment. And this generally means a couple of things. If you have 500 applications with all over the place, that means like Ruby on Rails, PHP, ASP.NET, Java, then, well, this is not an option because your tool support, needs to be run on everything. But if you have only, let's say, using Ruby on Rails and all of your projects are Ruby on Rails or a particular framework on top of Ruby on Rails, then obviously you want to test your scanner whether to see it works. And to give you an example, let's talk about ASP.NET MVC, ASP.NET Web Forms. I think it's a good example. They got built-in cross-site request forgery protections, which is good. And they got a bunch of other security features. And while scanning them, you need to be able to understand that, to be able to crawl the application and to attack the application. Quite similar with Google Web Toolkit. Unless you understand the communication in Google Web Toolkit, your scanner won't work. So, for example, Netsparker, we got specific support just for Google Web Toolkit because it's just awkwardly designed and not standard get post request parameter design. So first thing, you need to be sure if your environment is like that, you need to be sure it works on your environment, and that's only logical thing to do. But the second thing, how can you, to get to your point, how can you be sure your coverage is good? How can you say your scanner can find everything? I think it's very hard to say that, and I don't think it's possible. And what I say is the best way to do, there are third-party benchmarks. There aren't many of them. One of them is SecTool Market. I don't know whether you have seen it. You have seen it possibly. It's quite popular at this point.
Is that Shay?
Shay Chen, yeah.
Shay Chen, yeah. We had him on the show. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's super nice.
Oh, right.
I love that guy.
Fantastic. And I know his name is pronounced differently.
It is, yeah. He says it's okay if we just pronounce it the way we feel comfortable. He's cool.
Okay,
he's so nice.
That's good. Yeah. So He did a fantastic job at that. And the first time I've seen it, I'm like, okay, finally a guy systematically approached the web application security scanning, right? Before that, we had benchmarks. But what they did, okay, let's write random 3 crap applications and 2 scanners at them. That doesn't mean that's not systematic. And what you want to do, okay, there's a SQL injection. There can be 200 ways of SQL injection that we know of, right? So let's compare scanners, whether they can find all these 200 or not.
Right. Yet he developed his own vulnerable application framework to test all the scanners. Right.
Oh, he did a lot of job on that. It's like, I mean, I know because we have internally a massive, test environment, and we have a team, a dedicated team, just working on this for years. So, seeing that he single-handedly, albeit it's smaller than us, but completely public, single-handedly as like a voluntary project, did this. And then went ahead and compared, I don't know, like 10 big scanners and 50 almost open source scanners, small scanners. It's just immense. And I think that's a good resource to say, okay, is your scanner is good on coverage? Because this guy has about, I don't know the exact number, but let's say 1,000 tests. I think it's around that. And he's tested all the scanners, and here's the results. And that's some realistic real-world coverage that you can say, okay, if I were to test this scanner on 50 different applications, I will be possibly hitting the similar numbers. Right. If Shay's report says scanner is going to find 95% of the stuff, possibly it will be in that range. I don't think it will be significantly different. And I think that's almost equivalent of, I think in many other industries, we see this kind of research a lot. But obviously, web scanner being a very niche market, it's not there. And it's great to see someone is doing that.
Right. How many job offers have you made to Shay? And I'm sure you're not alone, right? Like, what web app company wouldn't want Shay working for them, right?
That's another thing, really. If we were to work with them, then, the whole benchmark wouldn't mean anything to us.
That's right. From that point forward,
like, okay,
right?
Yeah. Result.
Yeah, his results would be out the window from that point forward when he's a good job.
That kind of, exactly. You want that kind of person to be independent.
Right.
Then they are credible. And if they are not independent, whether by us or someone else, then, it's a different deal.
Right.
And funny enough, there were other issues, there were other benchmarks in the past. And some of them later, quite discussed a lot whether they were like not real results and kind of fudged, towards any scanner or something like that. So you don't want to be in that position.
Ferruh, another kind of just question out of left field. I think this year we've seen more than any other year. We're talking more about Docker, containers, orchestration, and those types of ways to deploy all applications and web applications as well. How has that impacted your testing this year, and what are some of your plans coming up for the next year or more that will help look at the security problem that kind of changes a little bit or a lot, in depending on the case, with containerization?
That's something we are looking into, but to be honest, at this point, I don't see any obvious impacts in the scope that we do. What we do in Netsparker, the highest, we are strictly on the application level. Rarely we touch a little bit more TCP or network level, and that's in the scope of maybe SSL checks, and a little bit maybe server check, but never to point whether we check ports or completely different services. And I think in that environment, the Docker, only difference it makes in our life, kind of, is when you deploy your environment, is the safe environment, does it affect your web application? And that's, I think, at least we haven't seen any obvious reason to do any specific checks or anything different, because if you haven't deployed your Apache correctly, it doesn't matter it's in Docker or any other environment, or your Nginx or whatever. It will be the same checks. It will be the same things that we know of. So right now, we are not aware of any specific checks, but that's something definitely we started to use as well internally. So we are observing like, okay, is there anything that we can touch? Is there anything that affects us in here? And so far, we don't know. We haven't done anything. We haven't spotted anything, but maybe we will see more.
That's great. That whole space is very confusing. There's a lot of language. We talked about it last week too. But I think it highlights the value that an automated external scanner brings, because it doesn't matter the underlying architecture. You're testing the application from the outside. And I've always felt Netsparker has been a sponsor now for a while. In our own independent tests, we like using Netsparker very much and like that external aspect of it. So I think that's really important, especially as other technology evolves, that it's still relevant. So you guys are doing a great job at Netsparker. We love having you on the show, Ferruh. Is there anything else that you want to point people to? Things coming up. I know we're ending the year here, but are there things people can look forward to next year, or new features or products or conferences that you're attending?
We actually got a quite cool feature coming up. We're pretty much completed it, but we are waiting for January to launch it. We have implemented an extensive set of out-of-band checks. So, I talked about blind SQL injection, how hard it can get for a pen tester to test. And maybe even more complicated test is checking out-of-band issues. To give you an example, you make a cross-site scripting, and then it's persisted on the database. Then next day, the admin logged in, and your cross-site scripting executed. So it's not happening in there. It's not on the public interface. Maybe it's executing on the intranet that behind the VPN, whatever. So we wouldn't catch that. We don't catch that right now. We are missing that kind of vulnerability. So now we will start identifying that kind of vulnerabilities through mostly DNS, our custom DNS server, which also, you mentioned about Dockers and containers.
I was just going to say, you're using Dockers and containers to catch those exceptions, right? Because you can spin up a small instance. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. And even better, also, we give you the option, okay, you can have your own custom DNS, because, you might be care about that. You might not want to use our DNS. We understand that being in security. And you can deploy yours internally or externally and just configure your Netsparker to use it. And this technology will allow us to find so many more vulnerabilities in so much easier. And if you think about, again, doing this as a manual tester, you need to have this kind of custom DNS server already set up. There are options, so you can have it. That's not a problem. Then you need to test against it. And to give you a better example, maybe I talk about SQL injection and blind SQL injection without any response. And think about an async SQL injection. So the time wouldn't change. Time is always, 1 second response. But SQL query that you injected actually work. But how can you know that? So now what we do, we inject a SQL query that triggers a DNS query when it worked. And then we collect that data and feed back into the client. And then we tell, okay, look, we did this attack from here and we got the response from there, but from the page, we got no response whatsoever. So possibly it's async, or maybe it's aggregated in somewhere and executed every other minute, something like that. So again, as a normal tester, this is very complex to test because you need that kind of particular setup, and then you need to fast for it. You need to attack for that thing in everywhere. And this applies to remote file inclusion issues. This applies to code execution issues. This applies to SQL injection, cross-site scripting. So there are various places that we will start detecting all these issues in out-of-band manner through DNS queries.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. Well, Ferruh, thank you very much for appearing on Security Weekly. As always, it's wonderful having you, and we look forward to having you on the show again.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ferruh. We'll be right back.